Welcome everybody to session 2B of the Global Careers and Education in Sport Summit today. We're joined by a guru, I think, in sport, not just in Australia, but around the globe. And I'm absolutely honoured to be chatting with you today, Daniel, our first guest, Daniel Cullinan, the General Manager of Commercial from the Melbourne Storm. It's been a long time, we were just saying before we started today, since we've seen each other. We actually went overseas to play football many moons ago, a long time ago. So it's great to reconnect and to see you today and to see so many great things that you've achieved as well. And as a bit of an introduction from that point of view, Daniel has travelled the world in multiple marketing, commercial and business development and managerial positions around the world, having worked for the Australian Football League, Sporting Kansas City in the Major League Soccer, and the Houston Rockets and New Orleans Pelicans in the NBA, and now finds himself back where it all began, Daniel, at the Melbourne Storm. How are things going?
Good, mate. Obviously, and thanks for having us. Look, a lot of challenges right now, which I'm sure we'll touch on, but things are going really well. The team's traveling really well, and it's a tough environment out there. But I think the Storm are doing a really good job, and I think sports in Australia, with everyone that's going against the challenges that they've got right now, are doing a really good job.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, as obviously for the people tuning in from around the world, it's COVID sort of kicked back up a little bit here, which has made it sport just at the minute a little bit more problematical. But I think it's something that we'll bounce through. But take us a little bit through your pathway. Obviously, you're a talented Aussie rules footballer, but also a basketballer. Went over the States and spent some time there. You started off at Melbourne Storm and then went back to America as well to work in some of the organisations over there. Run us through your pathway into sport and how you've sort of transitioned back to the Melbourne Storm now.
My life involving leading up to probably the job at the Melbourne Storm was more playing sport. Travelled around Australia in a number of locations playing footy, which dictated some of the jobs that I had, none of which were in sport. Probably to start, my first role in sport was at the Melbourne Storm. I looked after corporate hospitality. We did a lot of the corporate suites all the way through to the corporate packages, and that was my first real job. Fantastic opportunity. For people that don't know, Melbourne Storm are a one-team town, which is, in a competitive market, which isn't the number one code in the state. So, it was a great job to first start at. It's a very popular product. It's a strong brand. So that was I was very fortunate to be involved in that. But I got to the point in my career where I wanted to be involved in sort of the leading, whatever sport I wanted to go into. I wanted to be involved in the leading code globally. I saw the opportunity. I really wanted to, obviously, as you just said, Ryan, I had a huge passion for basketball and decided to go over to America. It was quite tough to find a job over there. Even when you applied for applications, as soon as you go to enter your address, they don't actually, the form sort of falls over. So I saw a position in New Orleans. I didn't know much about New Orleans. I only heard about Bourbon Street pretty much, but I know that I got to a point where I saw a job, I really wanted it, and I reached out to that contact directly, just with a short email and my resume. Didn't know the person's email address, because it wasn't on the website, so I had to guess 7 different types of formats of email addresses. 6 bounced back, 1 went through, and I had a Skype call with him the next day. After that, I made it to the top 3, and they said to me, if you want the role, we've got to meet you in person. So 3 or 4 days later, I flew myself over for the interview. I was only in the States for around 36 hours and spent probably meeting 4 different interviews, meeting across the departments, and then turned around and flew back. And by the time I landed in Sydney, I had the job. So whirlwind of 36 hours, interviewing in the middle of the night, pretty much. But it was, an amazing experience, well worth it. And obviously it opened the door to being involved in such a passionate, project for me, in being in sport and basketball and then the NBA.
I think it's just to jump in there for a second. It's really interesting because we've got a lot of students that are tuning in and watching in their classes today, Daniel, and university students as well. And you look at the traditional ways of applications. We've heard some stories this morning about, and we'll see more through the day of, I guess a lot of people go through teamworks in America for jobs, etc. But being creative, I guess, to find a way to connect when you're in a pool of maybe 1,000 applications for jobs, to find a way to actually build that relationship and connect to, I think is a really good lesson for people sort of, tuning in here, to find a way to do it and to be able to jump on a flight, get over there, get back, to find a job and then pack your life up. That was really cool. So tell us a little bit about, the job there, and then how that, transitioned into some of the other jobs that you had in America.
Yeah, I think before you jump on that, I think key is to find your point of difference. And if a student and you're looking to go over for one of your dreams and to work overseas, doing your research on visas and a number of things that the role entails, and really reading into that and going over and above, because if they're going to take a chance on you from coming over, it's actually not that difficult. And there are many ways to not have cost to any organisation, which is a gamble for them over there. There's not that you can go down a visa path that doesn't have that. So I think it's about, if you're in a position, especially as a student, and you have the opportunity eventually, once this is all sort of over, pandemic's over, and you want to do it, you really have to create that point of difference, because over in the US, like in any sports organisation, there are probably thousands of people applying for that one role. So the role over in New Orleans wasn't too different than what I was doing at the Melbourne Storm. It was corporate hospitality, so it was suite sales, courtside sales, and very, very small amount of actual sponsorship sales. Mm-hmm. It was, I think the reason that I was successful in the end was sort of what I touched on earlier. I was coming from a code that wasn't the most popular in the state. So we were almost a little brother, very much like the New Orleans Hornets and Pelicans now are in New Orleans. If companies aren't spending their money at the New Orleans Saints in the NFL, they're spending it at LSU University. If they're not spending it there, they're probably investing in corporate hospitality at Mardi Gras for businesses to host and spend time with. So we're very much sort of maybe the third to fourth decision on people entertaining, which I think came with my, I think that I really came with a drive of understanding what a situation was like. And part of my interview was that, I'd recently come from a position at the Storm where we went through a salary cap issue, and I saw what it was like for a brand to be at the top, collapse, and then rebuild and become one of the leaders in the industry again. So I was able to tell a really good story, and said that, probably the biggest thing I've lived off is that I don't believe sales are geographically confined. Yes. I believe if you have the right process and you believe in who you are as a salesperson, and you find, the type of salesperson you are, that you can sell anywhere. And, that was evident when I got over there, that although my accent was very different and hard to understand in Louisiana and Texas, it absolutely meant that, I had my point of difference in being over there, and I ended up being, successful in the role and really enjoyed it.
It's great feedback. I think that's finding the ways that you can be relatable in different environments, and backing yourself in is critical to, I think, the success of any job or position, for an athlete, for someone working in sport, etc. too. So some really good points there. And I think following you on social media back then when it all started, and seeing some of the cool things you were doing for different events. I think there was one night where maybe Will Farrell was there doing something as well that I might have seen in one of the events back in the day. But tell us how that progressed from that role, and then into maybe some of the other ones that you had over there.
Yeah, so I got into a position where we were actually owned by the league when I was in New Orleans, and there was a private owner that was looking to buy the Pelicans out. My boss said there was an opportunity at the Houston Rockets to take up a more of a sponsorship role, which is what my focus was when I got over there, and I fell in love with what they were doing as a team, and how exactly the process of sponsorship was such a big part of American sport, which I don't think it was as much in Australia. I think, at this time when I left, it was very much probably simple traditional marketing of signage and other areas. What I did learn over there was very much about how to get creative. So when I went to the Houston Rockets, it was probably an unbelievable experience, and I was very fortunate, as you just touched on. It was the year that the Houston Rockets were hosting the NBA All-Star Weekend as well. So I got to step in and put my foot in my interview process. Actually was 4 or 5 interviews that spent probably 80 to 90% of them asking questions about Australia, and probably 10% of asking questions about what my credentials were and exactly how I was qualified for the role. But look, very much about it was just culture and personality. I had that year at Houston Rockets, which was a fantastic experience. Got to work during NBA All-Star weekend, so got to deal with a lot of the ownerships and a lot of the whole weekend is just something that is next level. And that was just a real eye-opener, even outside of the NBA. So it was, look, at the whole, and we got 43 games in a year, which are regular season, not counting finals. So it is very much when you're on, you're on. And then in the off season, if you're involved in partnerships, as people would know, it's pretty much a 12-month job because most of your work's done in the off season. So I then saw an opportunity. One of the guys that was actually at the New Orleans Pelicans was becoming a vice president at the Sporting Kansas City. He was taking up his first role as a manager. He wanted to bring people into his team that he knew, that he trusted. And he rang me up and asked me if I'd go to Sporting Kansas City. That to me was going against what I'd probably gone over to do, which was be involved in basketball. But I saw this as an opportunity for someone that was putting a lot of belief in me to take that step, be part of his team. That year was the year of the World Cup, so 2014 to 15. And yeah, it was just an awesome experience to be part of. A couple of our players were part of it. I got over there and we actually won the MLS Cup 6 weeks into me being in the role, which was amazing, and going into a penalty shootout. It was ultimately the best experience I did from a business standpoint, because it taught me the best traits and also the manager I never wanted to be. So I went over there. My boss was one of the best salespeople I'd ever worked for, but I also learned so much about how to pitch, how to get creative. But what I did learn then was, the kind of manager I wanted to be moving forward. And when I brought that back to Australia, I didn't actually do my research. Whenever you're going somewhere, do your research, because I didn't realize negative 26 degrees was going to be the temperature in Kansas City. And coming from Texas and Louisiana, it was very different. But look, came back to Australia, sort of thought that based on the size of exactly, what the NBA was, that the only job I could come back to was probably to work at AFL headquarters. I had a job in between them across the Middle East and Asia, selling sports networks programs to Channel 7s, 9s, Foxes, CBS Sport, TNT, wherever you are in the world, those kind of networks. Came to have my job at the AFL, which was very much involved in managing the team to drive commercial revenue, and spent 2 years there. Saw an opportunity opened up back at the Melbourne Storm. I love the culture here. I love being involved in club. I love the passion that the code involves, and I think I lost a little bit of that at headquarters, and very much love where I'm at again.
Yeah, mate, it's a fantastic pathway. And I think the amount of conversations I've probably referenced, knowing you and being, when we're probably 16 years old or whatever it was, from there to see that pathway. I know how many conversations I've mentioned about this one guy. I know how good his career pathway has been, but at the same time, you found a way to get creative, to network really well, and to refine and be really good at your craft. And I remember as an athlete, you're a really hard worker, and no doubt that's exactly why you are where you are today. So I guess stepping from the American sporting landscape, or Australian to American and then back to Australia, did you find that the lessons and learning that broader skill set when you went to America helped you with that role, and then when you came back to Australia, the lessons learned and I guess the different skill sets, different environments has helped you back with your roles over here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I came back from the US to Australia, it was probably a bigger difference than going to America. As I said, I sort of touched on the little brother but everyone loves sports. If you're in Melbourne, you love sports just as much as they love it in each of the cities in the US. So I think that the number one thing for me was when I came back, I very much learned about sponsorship. I very much learned about how to pitch, and the levels in which you can go to and the resources that you can use over there. Sporting Kansas City, we took things to the next level. We had prospective sponsors come on. We turned the stadium LEDs on. We took them out to the stadium. We lit up their names all over the stadium. We had the coach come and present with their own jersey. We catered for them in the meetings. That was just not even thought about in Australia, or Melbourne, I should say, in the sports that I was involved. Then from the partnership standpoint, I mean, America, every single lounge that I went into, every room I went into, anything that I went into in some of the arenas and grounds over there in America were all sponsored, which wasn't like that when I left here and the first time. And, even the lifts, which are actually the internal lifts for players and staff, was actually sponsored. And I was thinking to myself, who actually sees this? But it was absolute next level on how much they actually got creative on what they were looking to do and looked into all the resources they had and thought about, what is the angle that I can go with in achieving these companies' goals. And I think that the thing and part of the reason in the US is that, if you look at Australian sport, it's 120 minutes, say the AFL, for example, is a playing time with very little time to be able to activate or find sponsors. America has a really big, amount of time that they need to do it. I mean, in basketball, there's, about 30 timeouts a game, which needs to have, sports presentation or sponsor activations. And then you look at NFL football, that's a 48-minute game with probably only 12 to 14 minutes of playing time. So there's a big gap of there where opportunity can lie for sponsors to be able to do things. And, that's where I really learned from the US, how to think outside the box. And that was probably one of the things I really brought back. And in my interviews, I talked about some of the pitches I did and some of the deals that I have creative I got to close deals over in America.
Do you mind running us through maybe some of those deals? I mean, you don't have to be too specific about that, but maybe some of the things that you did over there that you spoke about coming back here that you're really proud of in your roles over there.
Yeah, probably two stand out that I've always sort of talked about, and one was with a university over in the States, which actually became the biggest university deal at the time across the league in MLS. It was Kansas City. It was in Kansas City, and there was a lot of big universities around there. So you had Kansas City, Kansas University, Kansas State University, Missouri University, and then there was this university, Park University, which was a little bit out. But usually when you go and meet with these places, it's all about student enrollment. How can we get more students to the campuses? But there was just no way in which Park University could compete, even though it specialised in different areas, could compete with your Kansas unis and bigger places like that. During the first meeting, we actually found that they had a really strong avenue of online registrations of people studying online from their military in the US overseas. And it was just part of the conversation. And I think that's what you need to understand when you go to meetings, is it's not always going to go down the avenue that you originally think, but it's where you take it from there. So we then identified that there was a real opportunity to get more online people studying online from overseas. And the angle we ended up going down was that they then became the presenting sponsor of the national anthem, the return of military veterans to meet their families on field, which is ultimately the most powerful on-field presentation I've seen. To have these people that haven't seen their parents for 2 years to come back, surprise them on field as they're coming back. And, the game operations team over in the US and a lot of the marketing team do a phenomenal job. And that was just an amazing experience to be part of from Park University. They opened a section in the stadium, which was for returning soldiers from overseas to sit there and actually watch the games. And they created a very bespoke angle, and it increased registrations online overseas and gave people awareness that they could join courses and do things. And that meant that it was an angle that didn't compete with Kansas and Kansas State and Missouri, who were all competing for the same thing. So there was that one. And the other one was an organization I walked into, and the first thing they said to me when I walked in was, I'm only doing this as a favor for the legal counsel. I don't need anything. But let's just have this first catch up. And I was like, okay, that's pretty brutal. But they ended up becoming a 250K partner first year. And then another 3-year deal was because what we were able to do is find them as an electrical business, find them contracting roles at the new stadium, training facilities that we were doing, and other opportunities that they could generate business for. And suddenly that made it like they needed us. Yeah. We had extra contracting work for them. So they was relying on us to provide them business as we were for them to be able to come on as a partner and really add value to our organization as well. So I think it's the one reason I came out of it was going into things not expecting what you always plan for and being prepared. And I think walking away with 2 deals in 2 very different ways, one which was an angle I didn't go down, and one which was an automatic no when I first walked in.
I think they're great examples, Dan. And I think for anybody listening to this, we encourage you to take notes, because this isn't just, I think, applicable to the commercial sense, but I think in any type of business transaction, etc., or any type of line of business, there's a lot of take-home, value out of what you've said. It's really good, and 2, different examples, which is great. So, in your current role now as the GM, the general manager at commercial at Melbourne Storm, run us through what your role is in that, and then maybe the team that supports you underneath that.
Yeah, so my job is to drive and identify commercial revenue for the Storm, whether it be through apparel, partnerships, stadium, digital commercialisation, which a lot of the pathways to revenue are going down at the moment. I have a team which I think are on the call today, a fantastic and huge support, and you are only as good as the team around you, and offering the more responsibility for these team members, and anything you can do for them is only going to help yourself and also the business in succeeding. But I also look after the servicing side, which I think you'll figure out pretty quickly that as a salesperson, you can't sell everything and anything, because then now that I manage the service side, I realise how hard it is for our account managers and ourselves to deliver on it. So we need to be far more realistic in regards to what we sell. But the servicing side really opened my eyes to delivering on all contractual benefits, and I have a couple of superstars that work in our team for that. And then I also look after the corporate hospitality, so the corporate networking of business to business and the selling of game day hospitality and packages. So it's pretty well rounded in regards to the commercial side, but we look after a number, probably the highest amount of revenue along with the membership team. So it's demanding, and there's been a big, obviously the last 12 to 18 months has been quite difficult, but with the team around us, I think we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, I was actually just going to touch on that, and it's great to have that support around that. In the last 12 to 18 months through this COVID period, what are some of the challenges that you found or you faced, and maybe some of the opportunities that presented themselves through that as well? Did you have a significant drop in revenue? Was it better than you thought? How have you bounced back from that as well?
Yeah, I think that I sort of took on that every challenge was an opportunity during this time. The first thing that probably came to mind was I'm going to find out really what kind of manager I am. The focus on people every time you wake up in the morning, that's the first thing should come to mind. How is my team doing from a health and wellness side of things? Have they got the resources they need to get what they need to get done today? And that should be realistically the first thing you're thinking. And when we eventually became spread out across states, it became even more important to make sure that there was always that touch point. You knew that you were always going to answer your phone, and then you were in constant contact with them when they needed you. So as a manager, I learned a lot about myself and worked really hard on that. And I hope, I did a good job for my team. The other part was the new business side of things. It was difficult, but again, it was very much about, finding that point of difference. And I think in many instances, you have to learn how to get creative as possible. And I think that if you were able to drive new business revenue during that time, which we were able to do, that puts you in pretty good stead for, how successful you could be for someone that's not actually going through this pandemic. But the other one was, and this is where I think our team especially did an amazing job, was the servicing side of the partnerships and current partners. We had only one fall off who went into voluntary administration as an airline, which you could probably understand. But the deliverables that our account managers were able to do on the things that were currently in place, and then find adequate replacements, which a lot of it, as I said, touched on, went to digital commercialization. But for them to work with internal stakeholders, work with the points of contact at the other businesses, and make sure that we deliver on a certain amount of benefits and objectives that they didn't ask for money back at the end of the year, was a really big win for our team, because it was a challenge. But again, that's why we all relied on each other. So probably management, new business, and retention were some of the biggest, I think, parts of what the last 12 to 18 months has opened my eyes for.
That's fantastic. And I guess for anyone aspiring to lead to where some of your staff may be currently sitting there in the servicing or part of the revenue team or commercial team. What are some of the traits or characteristics you think people need to possess? It's really important for, I guess, potentially the education piece and some of that experience, but what are some of the recommendations that you would see for people aspiring to do that, or maybe people that are working in different departments in sport, or maybe you're at that entry level position and aspiring to move forward?
Yeah, I'd say that there's a few things to it. I'd say that if you're going to be in one of those roles, that you've got to have a passion for sports. It is a demanding role. Not only are doing the normal work hours, there's over and above. There's weekend work, there's travel, there's events. So it is very much about passionate for the sport that you're doing. Being knowledgeable about the sport, by the way, I would say that's a key, because you're going to come across passionate people for that code. And if you don't know what's happening in your own backyard, that can be a difficult conversation to have. But I'd say that is one of the things that's key, is to understand that from the start. The other one would be, I don't think there's any role that I've worked across anywhere where relationships with internal stakeholders is more important than this. Mm-hmm. Businesses are so reliant on why they partner with you as a sporting organisation is access, usually, to your biggest assets, which are your players. Mm-hmm. And for us, that relationship with the football department, with the basketball department is key. And you need to be seen to always be working with them. You need to be seen as always not just asking for things. You need to be able to, go over, have conversations, be there for them when they actually need you as well. Because at times, it's going to be really difficult with football schedules and timetables. And if they know that they want to assist you and you guys have got that relationship, it's absolutely key. And working across marketing as well, for an example, and who you need in the business. There's just so many moving parts to a sports, working at a sports organisation, that getting things over the line internally are harder than sometimes getting deals done externally. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that I learned when I first got there, was really learning to manage people internally.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's very similar, I guess, in all the themes across all these sessions as well, is relationships. And a lot of people talk about that, and you hit the nail on the head about relationships are formed. I'm not just asking for things when you want something, but building really trustworthy relationships that, you're there to help, not just through the good times, but through the bad times as well. So it's really well spoken. And I think there's a lot of people, as I said before on this call, that would be taking a truckload out of this call, because I know that I sure am as well. So which has been fantastic. I guess for you, and we spoke about your pathway prior to working, take you back to the Melbourne Storm the first time. Prior to working there, was it a combination of, what was the university or TAFE pathway or an education pathway, and what was sort of the work experience pathway for you to land your first job?
Yeah, so my university degree was in the Bachelor of Business. And I'd probably say my passion for sport, like yourself, mate, like it's very much in Australia. That was probably, key in regards to knowing the landscape in Melbourne. And understanding, where the Melbourne Storm were playing in, what kind of market. So I'd say the knowledge of the product was key for me, and being in that sort of active sporting position. But that's not exactly why, you were successful for the role, because we had a lot of people in the business that didn't come from that background. But I think that, for me, I actually worked my two previous roles in, this wasn't cheating, by the way, but my previous two roles were staff recruitment. So I should have knew all the tricks and trades of what questions I was going to get asked in the interview, and was well prepared for it. But no, I think that the key was for me being passionate about what I was looking to get involved in, finding what my point of difference was, which is always key, which was coming from sports, knowing the landscape, being in part of the meeting. When I walked in there, I knew exactly who was in what position. I'd read previous press releases. I'd actually looked in and done all my research I could, going back to how successful they've been on the field and financially what they've done over the last few years. So when I went into that interview, I was locked and loaded for any questions that came my way. And I constantly brought up, previous things that had happened in the business that then they could talk to me about. I've gone to interviews where people in the interview love to tell you more about the business and their roles as much as you actually are applying for the job. So that I think is key, to have that two-way communication, rather than you just sort of going there and feeling like you're always talking and telling people what you can and can't do.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think that's, again, mate, a lot of wisdom coming from this session. And it's great to hear that. To the Melbourne Storm, I guess this is probably two parts to start to wrap this up. Do you offer work experience or internships or anything like that through the organisation?
Yeah, we can. Absolutely. We do take people on board front office wise. I think that I would encourage, to reach out and have that conversation. We have some of the most, we're privately owned. We have some of the most successful owners, including like Jerry Ryan with Jayco Caravans, who owns a number of businesses and is on boards. Matt Tripp from BetEasy, who started from the beginning and built an empire, and Bart Campbell, who's another one who owns an event company globally. So we'd encourage that. We also have probably the leading high performance team in sports, to be for 2 decades in the finals every year, and to bounce back and always be, in contention, I think goes to show the kind of skill set that we have from our medical staff all the way through to our coaches. And the most important part is the management of athletes, which, for the Melbourne Storm, we only have ever had 3 or 4 players to ever come out of Melbourne play for the Storm. So everyone is coming from interstate or overseas to play for the Storm. So player management is extremely important. So if you're in those areas, I would definitely encourage and reach out to me, and we'd love to, introduce you to people or look at some work experience opportunities from there. But yeah, I'll probably just before we go, and for the students that I learned over in America and they came out from, was one of the keys that I learned is to figure out what kind of presenter you are. There are so many sports organizations pitching to businesses, because if you're a business that's actually pitched in and sponsored any sports club, you've got 15 sports clubs calling you the next day to invest or ask you to join on board as well. So the one thing that they made us do was record ourselves in front of a video, present to your colleagues and teammates, and figure out, are you talking too fast? Are you looking at the screen too much? Are you reading off the screen too much? And critiquing yourself when you get to look back at the kind of presenter you are. It's an eye-opener to see how engaging you are with the meeting, because that's key. You only usually get one first impression, and that was one of the things that when I did at the start, I saw a lot of areas that I needed to get better in. And it's a small thing, but it's something you should probably try, because I think it'll help you out as a presenter.
It's fantastic, mate. No, look, I know we've got to sort of wrap it up. You've got a busy period at the moment, I think, with a few more lockdowns and trying to move things around. What's sort of happening right at the minute for the Storm?
Yeah, the team's just moved up north. We were hoping to have a couple of home games here in Melbourne after the team was away for the entire season, bar one game last year. So it's really hard for our partners at the moment who don't get to see the team and do a lot of the things that they've invested with at Amy Park. And, a lot of our corporate hospitality and corporate sponsors, aren't able to see the players that they've sponsored. So we're working on a lot of contingencies right now on how we can deliver on the contractual benefits. And it's just difficult to have your biggest asset and product not in the same state. And that's, again, where the relationships come into play when you need assistance and help from the footy department a couple of states away.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough environment, but hopefully we start to see some light at the end of the tunnel soon, and we can all start to move forward a little bit. But today's been really good. Before we wrap it up, I know we've spoken around a whole range of different things today. To sort of summarise, if you review back on your career now from when you started out or were progressing through, what are probably some of the key, maybe 2 or 3 take-homes or pieces of advice that you give yourself now?
I'd probably say be relentless in what you're trying to do and achieve. Identify what you're looking to achieve and where you want to go. My passion was sports, and I wanted to be in the biggest league in the world, and that's what I wasn't going to stop at. Relationships internally, I was able to, have someone from an organisation move to another organisation and want me to come on board. Now, they weren't even in my department at the time, but it was a relationship that I created that he said I wasn't maybe as skilled in what I needed to be, but I had his trust and that relationship there already. So internal relationships is definitely one of them, and be relentless with what you want to achieve. And I've always said to people in my team, look at the job you next want to get into, look at the skills and requirements, and figure out exactly in your current role what you need to do to be at that next role. And that a lot of the time is not at the organisation you want to be at. It could be anywhere else in other codes or other teams, but always be looking that next step ahead and seeing what you need to be successful in your next role.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Look, Dan, I could honestly sit here for hours and catch up with you, because I think the experiences that you've got from a global perspective, the roles that you play has been fantastic. And for me, probably, as we said, we grew up together, played some footy against each other and with each other back in the day as well, a long time ago now. But to see your career, it's someone that I've always looked up to and been really proud of, mate. And to, for you to give up your time in such a busy period right now is something that we're very grateful and thankful for. And, keep doing what you're doing, because we're all very proud of you, mate.
No worries, mate. And I appreciate you having me. And please, anyone that needs to reach out, please do. Yeah. And everyone stay safe.
We will. And we'll catch up soon, hopefully face to face, buddy.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
See you, mate. Thank you. Bye-bye.